And welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Budget Work Session for May 14th, 2020. And we'll start with introductions. I am John Hutchings, the chair of the board. And we also have in attendance Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser and Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and Assistant County Manager and the orchestrator of this budget session, Robin Campbell. And Robin, will you introduce your band of renown, please?
Yes. So we have in this corner Denise Doty, Olivia Odin, and I am very pleased to introduce, well, for me, she's up here. For you, she's down there. So I'm very pleased to introduce our new member of the budget team, Patty Risotto. She comes to us from the city of Kent, where she was most recently a customer service manager and had also worked as a financial analyst. Patty has a degree in business administration and also holds her certified financial government accountant. Is that the what's the title, Patty?
Certified Government Financial Manager.
Financial manager,
So
which
close.
is a very prestigious certification that you can earn on a national level. So we're very fortunate to have Patty join our team.
Welcome, Patty.
Thank you.
And before we begin, I want to be sure that folks have the opportunity to call in the conference line if you wish, not to participate, but to listen, actively listen. And that phone number is 360-252-9020, and the PIN is 1234. So you're welcome to join us that way. So go ahead, and am I starting with Robin or Ramiro?
I'm just going to introduce Robin, and this is a continuation of the conversation related to the budget. And we're going to be hopefully concentrating today on walking through some of the options that we have provided to you, and with the intent that at some point we'll continue to get to a point that hopefully by the end of next week, which is I have already scheduled a long day budget session. We'll get direction from the board as to how and what strategies you would like to implement to address the budget shortfalls here in 2020. And that is the immediate need. The reason as to why we need the board's direction by the end of next week, if there's any strategies you would like to implement that might involve county employees, we need to engage and give us time to have conversations with the different unions and the bargaining contracts. And also, we would like to start implementing whatever strategies the board puts in place on July 1st, 2020. And also, as part of the conversation today, hopefully we can have a conversation with the board as to how the new treasurer money, the CARES Act money that has come to the county, in terms of just about 15.7%, 15.7 million, as to how the staff is proposing the use and distribution of those dollars.
So I'm going to jump right into the items in your packet, and we're going to start with some follow-up information that the board has requested. So the first item is the 2019 General Fund Budget Summary. What you see here is basically the format that we use for quarterly reports. And what you have for the general fund budget is you had asked what were the primary sources of the revenue increase. So some analysis was done on that, and what you'll see in the right-hand margin of this page is that we collected significantly more sales tax than we thought we would, and that's something that we've been talking about, that sales tax was coming in quite strong. We had increases in other types of sales tax, like the criminal justice sales tax. We had quite a bit of revenue in timber income. In intergovernmental revenue, we were up by 1.7 million. $1 million of that is from the windfall in state court cost reimbursements. And you'll recall that we talked about how we actually received 2 payments last year when we were expecting 1. And that's what created $1 million windfall that I was encouraging you to use to create a rainy day fund.
Reserve, yeah.
In other items, we had increases in election services, motor vehicle license fees were up, treasurer fees, which is basically interest, was higher than anticipated. We had additional revenue than we budgeted for mental health services. These are primarily the involuntary treatment court costs being reimbursed by the BHO. There were traffic infractions. We were collecting more than we thought we would there. Again, interest was high. Then we had prior period adjustments that we were not expecting, and we sold some assets. So that is the major areas that came in higher than anticipated. Any questions about that?
Any questions? No.
All right, great. The next item in your packet is the financial status report for 2020. We are in mid-May, and this is when, if we had not been in the middle of the pandemic, I would have brought you the first quarter financial report for 2020. And if you recall, we had talked about being more deliberate in looking at these reports on a quarterly basis. This is what the report looks like. On page 1, same type of summary as you saw for 2019. I would say that these revenues are not adjusted for the impact of COVID-19. These are pre-COVID-19. So property tax was going to come in somewhat less than we budgeted. We always know that. Sales tax was growing at unprecedented rates, although starting to soften from the growth in the prior year. Other taxes include other types of sales tax, like the criminal justice tax, also coming in quite strong. Fines and forfeits were anticipated to come in less than the revenue projections for them. Our licenses and permit fees, again, quite strong. So were the intergovernmental payments. We were getting more of the city-county assistance from the state than we had anticipated, mainly because at the time of this estimate, REIT was coming in strong, and we get a share of what's called excess REIT for the state. Charges for services were a little less than anticipated. Miscellaneous revenue was running up. Again, interest was higher than we had thought it would be in the initial budget. This forecast in expenditures is based on the financial plans that came in from each office and department. So if you flip to page 2.
Hey, Robin, before you move from page 1.
Yes.
The charges for services took a little bit of a dump, like you mentioned. Is that because of board action? Did we reduce or did we waive any types of, or did we provide fewer services, or just fewer services were required or asked for?
Fewer services were being purchased where the revenue comes into the general fund.
Okay,
Than the offices and departments had estimated at the time of the original budget.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards has a question.
Yes.
Before we flip the page, going back to sales tax and then other taxes, I'm trying to figure out the difference here. You mentioned criminal justice. Does that include like treatment sales tax, the jail operating tax or building fund or anything? What are other taxes that you're referring to?
The bulk of this is the criminal justice sales tax. Treatment sales tax is in a separate fund. Detention sales tax is a different fund. Permanent revenues is another fund.
And where are they located at?
Those are located in different funds, and I have not printed out those financial plans for you this morning.
They're not part of the general fund.
Yeah, but we don't have it yet.
No.
Right,
No,
well, that I think needs to be part of the discussion if we're going to get into discussing what we can divert temporarily or permanently, how do we pay it back, those kind of things, so, and what they're
Right.
doing with that now. I think it's part and parcel that when we talk about sales tax, we should talk about total sales tax and show a combined amount, just so we have a better understanding of what we're dealing with, because I really can't, I can't get to the bottom of what we're doing here. We've got 3.6 and 4.2, you know, from revised budget to projected. And I don't get that breakdown exactly. We've got several funds. I'm just gonna use treatment sales tax. Do you know what that is off the top of your head? I know you don't have it down yet, but is it around $5.5 million or something? like that?
Roughly, yes.
And then some of the other 0.1% taxes reflect that same dollar amount. That's where I'm coming from on this.
Roughly. They're not exactly the same
No,
because
but-
different ones exempt different things.
Sure. But they're quite a substantial sum of money that we need to be looking at. Okay,
It is.
okay, good enough.
And we will have, right, we'll have those funds as well because you're going to have to make reductions there too.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So not today, but we'll get those for you. All right. Anything else about the revenue before we flip the page? Hearing none. If you look on page 2, you see each office and department and how much each is projected. They will be underspent by the end of this year. Some of these offices and departments factored in their current cost savings steps that they're taking. So they're not traveling. They're holding vacancies. They are trying to be more careful about what they purchase. All of the offices and departments are already implementing measures to create savings. Some of these reflect expenditures that they are making in response to COVID-19. So if you look, for example, at Department 29, that's emergency services, and you see that they're overspent by almost $100,000, that's because currently they have activated the ECC and are paying the costs of the responding to the crisis. So most, if not all of that, will be reimbursed by one of the grants that we talk about later this morning. But I just wanted you to know that many of these items already reflect savings and some of them reflect the COVID costs. When you look at the bottom line for expenditures, even though offices and departments have started to calculate what the savings are from the steps that they're already taking, at the bottom line, we anticipate the variance would be roughly $3.5 million, which is just slightly above 3% reversion, which is what we normally see in the general fund. So not much different than what we usually see. Any questions about that?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Gary.
What about, you said they're self-governing themselves. Are we putting a hiring freeze in place here pretty quick?
Well, that's for us to decide.
Yes, I know, but I mean, what could that mean to us if we do that? I think it's only responsible if we do something like that. I don't know how it's gonna lay out, but I think we need to talk about it.
Well, if you're willing to make that decision, that's what we're gonna be discussing, I believe, on the 22nd.
Well, I think the 22nd is too far down the road myself, but.
Next week?
As you may recall, that was one of the strategies that you were trying to narrow down.
I realize that.
Yeah. So we have to make those tough decisions next Friday, a week from tomorrow.
Oh, that's not too tough of a decision to make at this point, in my estimation.
It's one of several that we need to make a week from tomorrow. But we're not making those decisions today, I don't believe.
I could make it today.
I'm not asking if you're ready.
I know, I'm just saying I could make it today. I
Okay.
think we better start thinking out of the box here pretty quick.
Well, I agree with that. We have to do something because July 1st is right around the corner. So go ahead, Robin.
Okay, if that's the only question, then I will move on to the next document. The next item in your packet is the Thurston County Fair Fund. You made the decision to not have the fair this year. And I know what a tough decision that was to make. But we needed to share with you the impact of that decision on the fund. And it was the right decision to make. I'm not saying you should have made any other decision. All you need to know is that by canceling the fair, that impacts the fair fund. Because all of the revenue that would have been generated by the fair event will now not come in, and the expenses or the cost of the fair is less than the revenue it generates. So even when you eliminate the expenses of putting on a fair, you still come up somewhat short. So if you look at the plan that I've included in your packet, you'll see that the fair event in 2019, which is just about the middle of the page, it's the last column in the shaded area. In 2019, the revenue from the fair event was about $249,000. The department that runs the fair, CPED, is estimating that there will still be a small amount of revenue from the event, but it will only be approximately $35,000.
Could you clarify that from the event? You said, what are you referring to?
So I would need to refer to Josh and Linda for why they believe that there would still be some revenue from the fair event. I can't, I don't have that information. We'll get back to you on that.
Something like that. I don't know how it's gonna lay out, but I think we need to talk about it.
Well, if you're willing to make that decision, that's what we're going to be discussing, I believe, on the 22nd.
Well, I think the 22nd is too far down the road myself, but.
Next, we're in a loop.
We're in a loop.
No, I just, Elizabeth just joined and she had the, so I just muted her.
Okay, good.
Okay. So if that's what's projected for 2020, is that because of maybe what might be doing with the market with the kids and the animals?
Possible,
No.
but I really couldn't say. We would need to ask Josh and Linda.
Okay.
All right. So the next item is the fairgrounds. We generate revenue by renting out our space at the fairgrounds. Due to COVID-19, we are not renting out the space. We're not expecting to have large events this year. And we don't know if we'll be able to extend the rental space that people use for RV storage the rest of the year. We might be able to do that, but you'll see that in 2019, revenues from renting out the fairgrounds were about $174,000. Those are now anticipated to be closer to $31,000. So this is a significant revenue loss. In the expenditure side, the fair event, since we're not having an event, there are only the costs that we've already incurred of about $2,400. The fairgrounds, though, need to continue to be maintained and the operational costs continue. So those only reduce marginally from $386,000 to $362,000 for a net loss this year of $135,000, almost $136,000. And you'll see that this impact to the fund balance is significant because the fair fund, I should also mention that the board transfers $166,000 from the general fund to the fair fund to keep the fund balance sustainable and steady. So having this hit on the general fund, this is an example of why you need a adequate fund balance, especially in a fund that's volatile. And the fair fund is a volatile fund because we never know how much we're going to earn on the fair event or from fair rentals. So maintaining, in this case, a 3-month fund balance is what allows us in this crisis to have a positive fund balance, but it's quite low. Projecting a fund balance of $46,000 is extremely low. So what the board will need to consider is increasing the general fund transfer to this fund to create a healthy fund balance.
Well, okay, I do have questions. I mean, are we ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just need you to clarify what you're talking about here about transferring funds to have a healthy fund balance. I don't get that part of it.
So right now the board transfers $166,000 from the general fund to the fair fund every year.
Yes. Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is that you need to increase that by approximately $50,000 either in 2020 or 2021 to have a fund balance that will support the fair. It's going to come back. You see the revenues come back in 2021, but the fund balance is dangerously low.
So what is the target for that fund balance, Robin?
That's, yeah.
The 46,000?
No, what is the target to have a healthy
Oh,
fund
the
balance?
target. The healthy fund balance is approximately $130,000.
And where would you anticipate that would come out? In just general fund?
That would have to be from the general fund. That's your only source.
Boy, I think that's a mistake, figuring on doing that at this point in our deliberations. I think we need to look at that a little farther down the road myself, but maybe it's because I don't have a good understanding. I just, I question if that's a responsible expenditure at this point in time to tie up those capital funds is all.
I'm just putting it out there that this
sure.
fund is.
Okay.
Hey, Robin,
Yes.
could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of on the expenditure side on the fairgrounds, although they're from 2019, which $386,000 down to $362,000. Can you elaborate what constitutes those expenditures?
I cannot, but we can ask Josh and Linda to follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Denise, were you?
Well, I have a question. Did Denise want in?
Nope.
Nope, okay. When I look at the budgeted for 2021, we're looking at total revenue of $619,000. Is that, what are we basing that on in case we don't come back? I mean, what's that projection based on?
That is based on the assumption that we will come back.
That will revert back to what we have been a couple years.
That's right. That you'll have a fair next year, that people will go to the fair, that it will be successful, that large events continue and they continue to rent our fairgrounds. All of these assumptions are based on bouncing back in 2021.
So it's like the weather forecaster. Sunny tomorrow, and
Yeah, sunny tomorrow, maybe.
yeah, okay, I get that. All right, thank you. All right, press on.
Any other questions about the Fair Fund? I would also say that this is a perfect example of revenue loss in the crisis. It's unexpected, it's sudden, and we have no federal grant that will allow us to recoup lost revenue.
That was my next question, if any of that cares.
There's no federal money that we could use to fill this gap. That's why the new HEROES Act would be extremely important to the county. We could start to use the new funding from that bill, should it pass Congress, to fill these revenue gaps and make us whole. So,
For the listening public, can you explain that, the HEROES Fund a little bit more?
the HEROES Fund is a bill that was recently dropped in the House. It has many appropriations that are recommended. One of those that is of most interest to counties and cities is, I think it's $187 billion that would go directly to local governments. And the funding would be, we could use that for lost revenue as well as new expenses in response to COVID-19.
Maybe just a point of interest on that. Robin, is that the same fund they're talking about bailing out California, Illinois, and New York on their pension funds and those type of deficiencies they have?
No.
That is not?
No,
Okay.
So part of the provisions in the bill is a strict prohibition against bailing out funds that were already in trouble pre-crisis.
Okay.
So any jurisdiction that had a pension fund, specifically pension funds, that were in trouble prior to the crisis, that this money would not be used for those pension funds.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but this morning before I came to work, I was watching the news and the president is not supportive of what the Congress is putting together.
Oh, I didn't mute you in time.
Neither is the Senate.
Yeah, so
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Strictly
Okay.
a House bill.
whether there's an opportunity for negotiate the next round of federal funds is yet to be seen. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Debbie.
But this fair fund, though, is, a snapshot. It's a small focused fund, but it is just a very good example of what we're seeing as the challenges in the crisis.
Just another interesting point. In listening to one of the webinars yesterday, day before or something, it was brought out that it sounds like if we do layoffs, but yet we need to maintain things because of the COVID, if the answer is yes to those five statements, we could utilize some of that money that we got through on the CARES money to pay for that upkeep that we wouldn't normally be able to do.
So we'll talk more about that later this morning. We
Okay.
do want to have time to talk about how to use the, we're trying to refer to it as the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the CRF. So you'll hear that acronym more. And one of the things that we think we can do with the money, or that we know we can do with the money, is if staff are substantially diverted from what they would normally be doing to work that is in response to the crisis, then we can charge that time to the grant. So there is a possibility there.
Okay.
We're going to move on to the Unemployment Compensation Fund. That item is some great work that Denise did. We looked at the history of unemployment claims in the county based on information that is in our payroll system, not our payroll system, our financial system. And we found that the claims history in the Great Recession over a 3-year period, we had $1.5 million in claims, roughly. We know that this recession hit much harder and much more suddenly, and we're missing page 2.
It's 2 pages, so so it should have another
There's
one.
a second page. Okay, it's just not back to back. Sorry. Okay, so on page 2, you see the estimate of what if we have that same $1.5 million in claims, what the impact would be over 3 years.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Under the Coronavirus Relief Fund, I've got 2 different dates from guidance, April 22nd and and May 4th. Where in either one of these documents do you find that is not eligible for utilizing this fund? Where could I find that?
The reason that I say that we would not be able to use that funding for unemployment is because the unemployment is not in relation to the COVID-19 response. It's a result of the economic downturn that was caused by COVID, but it's cause, and the reason that we have to lay people off is the economic downturn and revenue loss, and the funds cannot be used for any purpose that is caused by revenue loss.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna say that is splitting hairs in my estimation. I think as long as the revenue loss is directly related to this emergency that we're in, and we can answer the 5 statements in the affirmative that were given out by Commerce 2 days ago, I feel that it is eligible. So I'm gonna want some more discussion on that, because I think you're making a mistake in that regard. Now, that's just my opinion on the research that I've done, and we don't need to get into it today if you don't want to, but we want to make sure we keep on track on that issue, because that's a $750,000 hit that I believe could be covered. That's just for 2020. We don't know what's going to happen after that.
So we're happy to talk about that today, and I'm just now, and we should probably save this conversation for later this morning, but one of the guidance that you have, it specifically says it cannot be used for lost revenue, and I'll need to find that, but it does specifically state that.
Well, the only reason that we're laying them off is because of the COVID. I don't care if it's lost revenue or not, but and on the 5 statements, we are still able to answer in the affirmative, in my estimation. And if you
Do we have
want to
that
get in-
conversation more will we have time for that this morning?
Well, I just don't want to start categorizing a loss if we really don't have that loss, and then we have to come back. So yes, we can do it later, but I think we need to rethink some of this stuff. And
Well, I understand.
Okay,
I just want to know, do we have time for that today though, Robin, to get into that discussion?
So hopefully we will.
Okay. And if not, then one on Friday for our 7.5 hour marathon, we can come back to that because that's going to be part and parcel of a lot of the budget discussions as to how we can stretch.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, carrying on with the unemployment compensation, you'll see that the current fund balance in the fund is a little over 1.7 million. We collect every year approximately 182,000. So we have that coming into the fund. That's a payroll cost that offices and departments pay. So if we reduce staff, that revenue to this fund will decrease, just as a side note, but we assumed it would stay steady for the purpose of this calculation. We think that the initial hit, and you see it on the graph on page 1, the first 3 quarters are the highest. So we kind of front loaded the cost to the end of this year when we lay people off. And the reason it drops off the way it does is people find other jobs and they run out of benefits. So the cost to the fund starts to drop off pretty rapidly. So even so, they would only claim benefits for half the year. So we assumed 750,000 this year. If you were to lay off or to have layoffs that were comparable to 10 years ago. And then we think this scenario assumes that the economy will bounce back fairly quickly and that by 2022 we'll be back to close to pre-recession levels of employment. So it drops down fairly fast. But this is just one scenario of what unemployment costs might look like. We needed to do this analysis. I've been telling you it's better to continue to pay employees than lay them off because the impact of the unemployment compensation fund. I will modify that statement to say it's better to continue to pay them in the short term. If we need long-term resolution, this is what we needed to reserve that fund for major layoffs and to have the ability to pay out unemployment when we start laying people off longer term. But just for when it was only going to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it really didn't make sense to hit this fund.
So, Robin, on the unemployment claims, the assumption of $750,000 in 2020, you briefly made an assumption that it was based on the past recession. So how many FTEs are involved in that? Just curious.
We will need to ask HR.
Okay.
Any other questions about the unemployment compensation?
well, Mike, it isn't as much a question, I guess, as it is a statement, because I'm at odds with your proposition that this is not eligible. And if in fact we're able to stretch it, make it I don't even think it's a stretch to make it eligible. But if that is the case, that initial $750,000 does not get expended at this point in time, and that gives us a pretty good cushion for 2021 and 2022, should this thing get extended. Personally, I feel if we don't open up pretty quick, the longer we stay on lockdown, the much longer our recovery is going to be. So I guess that's debatable as well. But, the way it's going now, if they keep talking about extending it out to July and different things like that. We might not even, we might cross the tipping point at some point. Nobody wants to even mention that. But, you know, the problem with crossing a tipping point is you don't know when you've crossed it until it's too late. So we better start making some challenges to what's going on here. That's a different topic, I realize that, but I don't think this fund is in as bad a shape as it's portrayed here. Another discussion coming up.
Okay, go ahead, Robin.
Okay, ready to move on? All right. So the next item in your packet is you had requested a list of all of the current vacant positions.
Oh, hey, Robin.
Yes?
We're going to address page 1 on the back of page 2,
Page
the general
1,
fund 2019 overtime.
2019 overtime. Oh. Thank you. I didn't realize that that had printed that way. So again, you had requested information on how much overtime we incurred in 2019. So this is quite simply that list by office or department. It's no surprise that the majority of the overtime was incurred by the sheriff and corrections. Because that's where the greatest need is. And we had budgeted approximately $1.4 million for overtime. Approximately $1.8 million was spent in overtime.
Right, and they're the only 24-hour operation, 7 days a week, with the exception perhaps of the coroner.
Right.
And which his is up quite a bit too because of that.
I think it's kind of funny to see district court 8.
8 hours. $8.
$8, okay.
On that one, connecting that to our list of strategies where it says eliminate overtime countywide, and then that's projected at 6-month estimate of 878, which is half of what's on this form. But the reality is we would not be able to do that. Because what I understood is we would not be able to just eliminate all the sheriff's overtime. That's not a possibility. So I just wanted to clarify that, make sure I'm tracking that.
Yes, I would say that that's correct.
So that strategy really shouldn't say on the strategy summary sheet 878,000 savings, because that's not the real impact of that of choosing that strategy.
Yeah, you're right. It's not practical.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what it says in the notes, that the note says that we've shown you the total amount of 6 months of overtime, and this number is too high because we could not completely eliminate it.
Got it. But
Yep.
yeah, but what this is telling me is that the proportion is mass. Like if we're talking about the sheriff, and I don't know if we're talking about the sheriff's portion of it not being reducible, that's like 90% of it. So it's not just lower than 878, it's way lower than 878. I guess is my point.
I would not say that the sheriff's overtime is not reducible. I think that there are ways to manage overtime, even in a 24/7 operation. You can never eliminate it, but you can manage it.
Okay, thank you.
I just have to comment on that. Having been in that seat in the past, I would probably disagree with you on that. As long as the county commission continues to sign off on the existing bargaining unit agreements. So it would take the county commission making some decisions on bargaining unit agreements to make that happen.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And I would also say that you're right, it can't be eliminated, and you mentioned it can be managed, and I believe that they are managing it to the best of their ability with what they have. So I got to give them credit for that, because they've been on this doggedly for years, the overtime.
That's true.
Okay.
All right. Ready? Next. And now we'll go to vacant positions. So again, you had asked for a list of all vacant positions in the county. This is vacant positions prior to the month of February. Is that, I'm looking to Olivia and Denise. What, do you know the effective date of this list?
It was on the sheet. I believe it's 4/28.
As of 4/28, thank you. So you'll see that quite a few positions are here. I know a few of them have been filled, but many of them remain vacant. So you'll see that I got to put my glasses on for this one. It printed small. You'll see that the annual cost of these vacant positions, had they all been held, would have been $2.8 million. And we assumed that half of them would be filled. And so half of the year for the half that would remain vacant would yield savings of about $708,000 in the general fund. And then the various other funds are reflected on pages 2 and 3.
What do you mean when you say half of them will be filled?
Assumption, yeah.
So we assume that there are some of these positions, if the board were to implement a hiring freeze, the assumption is that it would not be a hard freeze, if you will, that there would be exceptions allowed to the freeze for at least some of these positions. And as I said, some of them have already been filled. So for example, you have 4 correction deputies on this list. We know that the jail has minimum staffing at this time with the number of FTEs that you've already approved. If these 4 positions cannot be filled, that results in overtime, and overtime costs more than straight time. So I would assume that you would exempt the correction deputy positions. If we went down this list position by position, each of the offices and departments may be able to make a strong case, and we assumed about half of them would get exempted from the freeze, because we had really nothing else to base it on. So we just assumed half.
Well, at some point, I want to get into revenue because I think we're missing the boat on revenue. And I know there isn't much we can do about the coroner's office or the sheriff's office when it comes down to this particular topic. But I do think we ought to freeze everything else and review those positions. Yes, we might very well exempt some and let them move forward. But if we eliminate a lot of the regulatory burden and get ready for this boom that's coming, because we're going to have flight from the urban core, not only in Seattle and Tacoma and those areas, but from around the nation. It's going on right now. I just one of the major tech outfits just canceled their $2 million square foot office in San Francisco because they are now going to work remotely. That I saw that on a segment on the news this morning. That's going on throughout the United States, and we need to prepare for that. And if we prepare for it, then we will have revenue. We just recently had a submission of a 600 lot development over on KG and 58. If we quit dragging our feet and get it ready, get it prepared, get it going, we will be in line to accept some of that growth. Along with that is going to come revenue, and those people are going to be working from home as a general rule. So we're one of the few places they've got to go. If you look at that bubble of growth that's been going on, I truly believe we're going to be up against a situation where, Escape from New York, probably a movie 25 years ago or something. It's going to be real. We're going to have a flight of young professionals that are going to come to rural America, and they're going to experience the American dream, and we're going to have problems in the inner cities. So I just think it would behoove us to get going, think ahead, get it ready to go. So that's my push for revenue, because that's going to bring immediate revenue, immediate jobs. It's going to be a building boom. So I think we need to pay attention to that and think about that as revenue as we move along here.
Okay. Continue, Robin.
Okay, any questions about the vacancy list?
I still want to go for a freeze myself.
It's on the list, Commissioner.
Yep. And any exemptions that we may impose on that too.
Right, so the savings might be higher, the savings might be lower, but we needed to get you a ballpark number.
Got it. Thank you.
Right,
Commissioner Mensah has a question.
yes.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment before you move on. Just an observation, I guess. There's just quickly counting here. There's 32, something like that, vacant positions, general fund connected. If I were to take the cutoff of positions that have been open for 6 months or more, which a lot of people have talked about, I counted 8 quickly. 8 positions, so a quarter of them fall into that bucket of they've been open more than 6 months. And even all 32, well, at 16, you're saying that's the savings of 708,000. If the answer is only half of that, because we're going to say that we're going to eliminate or freeze or whatever the positions that have been open for 6 months, we're talking about even half of that. I'm just saying this because this is what I'm observing in the forms. I know a lot of people might be listening without scrutinizing the numbers in front of them. This has been a very popular idea that I've been told we need to do. We need to, and that could be true, but it's maybe $300,000 saved, not $3 million saved. I just want to make that point.
That I would say that is correct, especially if you were to exempt the higher paid positions, and the positions that are lower paid are the ones that are held, then the savings would be even less.
I'd like to point something out here to follow up on what Commissioner Mensah brought up, because that's a good point, and I think we need to do it sooner than later, and here's why. When the economy is good, you have a heck of a time filling positions similar to those that have been vacant now for probably that 6-month period. When the economy is bad, you have people seeking jobs, and you will easily be able to fill them. So that's why I think it's very important that we put that freeze in place earlier than later, because the economy is certainly not good. Look at all the unemployment claims. Those people are going to be looking for work. It'll be an opportunity that they can get a job if we don't put a freeze in place. If we don't put a freeze in place, they're going to get filled. So I think we should get on that topic as soon as possible to follow through with Commissioner Mensah said.
Conceptually, we agreed on that freeze right away about a week ago, as I recall.
Well,
So
but we
that-
haven't done anything officially, and I think we need to get that word out officially as soon as we possibly can.
And we're deciding that on Friday, I understand, where all these decisions come down. Yes, we're doing it. No, we're not. Or we're not sure about this one. So we got-
I know, I think Friday's too late. I think Commissioner Menzer brings out a very strong point that we should
Yep.
be looking at that. Today is good enough for me.
Well, we are looking at it.
I know, I
That's
think we
why he brought up an
oughta
excellent
give
point.
some direction today as well.
All right, is today the day for direction, for Romero? Is this the time we're voting?
Commissioners, it is up to your purview as to how you want to deal. What Robin is going through is giving you the framework. The framework of all the information that you requested when you looked at the different options that you had before you last week. So the next step in the process to go back to those strategies, and one of those strategies is for you to consider hiring freeze. And if at that time you'd like to provide a direction, we just follow suit with whatever direction the board is giving us. So at this point Robin is just bringing back the information you requested last week. And the next, if I can go, the next paper is going back to the strategies that you
Yeah.
already started looking at it. You narrow down by 2. And then we're gonna go back and revisit that, which hiring freeze is one of those strategies. So at that point, the board will have the opportunity to say, A, nay, move on, or wait.
And I guess I'd ask, when would that day be that we would be able to say yay or nay?
You can do that probably in 5 minutes.
Oh,
We
good,
can
I
probably
wanna
do that.
do it in
Yeah.
5 minutes. I
When
think
Robin is
Commissioner
done with
Menzer-
this, that's going to generate further discussion on the topic.
Allow Robin to give you that information that you requested last week.
Yeah, okay, so what Commissioner Menzer brought out, I think is right on target, and we should say, right now, those positions are, we as a board are given direction until we get it figured out. Put that freeze in place right now.
Go ahead, Robin. We're going to get back to Commissioner Edwards and Menzer's decision in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay,
Let's finish this up, please.
all right. So I think we're done with the vacancy list, and we can move to the reductions.
There you are, Gary.
All right. So you've got a new reduction list because Denise and Olivia have been working to fill in where there had been TBDs. So we filled in as many as possibly could in this time. I would like to say that normally it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to put a budget together, and we have been doing this in 4 to 6 weeks. So we're working very hard, and Denise, Olivia, and me, and now Patty's joined us. We're so happy she's here. We're going to put her right into the mix. But we're bringing you these numbers hot off the press. So I apologize that you don't have them faster, but we're working as quickly as we can. This new list is highlighted in the places that there are changes. So when we had originally estimated the COLA, we used 1%. We received clarification from HR that our bargaining agreements for 2021 have a minimum of 1.5% COLA. And so the amount of the COLA would be higher than in the original estimate if we rolled it back 6 months. Would this be 6 months of a 1.5% COLA? Yes. Remember that the COLA in 2020 was 2.4%. So 1.5% for 6 months would be 519,000.
519, okay.
There's a change on line number 5. We received additional information again from HR that allowed us to put a better estimate than we had originally had. because we had new information. And so the estimate now of savings from a voluntary day off without pay per pay period, that's 2 days a month, based on participation in 2009, would be about $248,000. And we also had a voluntary contribution toward benefits. That's something new. And it was done again in 2009. And based on the 2009 contributions by employees, we could save approximately $337,000. And this is if we had about the same number of employees participate now as in the past. On the voluntary day off without pay period in 2009, that did not include any of the MTPs. Those were only hourly employees because at the time we didn't have a mechanism to calculate the time for MTPs. And so that could possibly be more now because HR has found a way. You convert a salaried employee to hourly for 1 week, and you can then deduct 8 hours of pay. So there's a way to do it now. So we could see savings higher than we saw in 2009.
I have a quick question on that. That is based on experience, is that right, from 2009? Have we done anything as far as putting anything out to ask employees if they would be interested in participating? And also on the benefit side of, I'm just kind of curious, how many spouses are out there in other employment that they could get on that insurance package? I think that's what you're talking about, is that right? I mean, they're not gonna just give up their insurance as much as they're gonna probably shift to a spouse that maybe has another job. Is that what you're thinking?
No, I think it's,
No, what happened in 2009, if I understand correctly, because I came the year after that. Oh, Denise, you've unmuted. Did you have something to add?
Oh, I don't know any of the details. We could get it from HR. I think as best as I could gather from the email, people were willing to contribute some towards their benefits.
Right.
Well, there was that, and there was also, as Commissioner Edwards was saying, some opted out to help the general cause because they would just jump on a significant other's insurance.
That's possible, but it was my understanding, as Denise said, that what people did was pay in. You know, you'd get your paycheck and then you pay something back to the county as part or all of the county's cost of medical benefits.
yeah, that is my understanding. As an example, if an employee gets a benefit by the county paying, let's say $1,000 in benefits, under a voluntary contribution, that employee can choose pay $500 back out of the $1,000. So that doesn't mean they will be reducing their benefits. It's just contributing back to what the county is paying for those benefits.
Right.
I guess I'd like to just point out, I believe there's a difference in the ability to claim medical expenses from 2009 to what we're doing in today's environment. So I don't know if there would be the same tax benefit today as there was in 2009. It might just be worth looking at.
I don't know that there was a tax benefit to the employee at that time.
Claiming a medical expense could have been it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know
We
is
need to
that
look at that.
people chose an amount. They didn't necessarily pay the entire amount of the cost. They chose how much they wanted to pay, and this was how much the county collected.
I don't know how that worked out. I wasn't, I wasn't involved in that. But I'm just hesitant on this voluntary stuff of, I just don't see employees giving that back. I mean, I know part of this is a bargaining unit situation as well. And, boy, I don't know, this is a lot of smoke and mirrors, for both 5 and 6 to me. I don't know that it won't happen. You might be right, it might happen.
Yeah, and this is just one of the options, and the only thing that we can give the board is the previous history. And you're absolutely correct, it's difficult to put our hands around what those 2 items will represent in 2020.
Right.
But it's just an indicator,
Well,
as one of the options.
yes, but I do think the tax ramifications are different now than they were then. And, maybe the contractual difference is also in place. I just feel it would be worth sending something out to the employees. Would you participate in X or Y if that was an option?
Well,
Just to see if we had some.
That will be part of the strategies, the board would like to, if the board wants to implement some of those strategies to get additional information, just give us direction.
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, for me, I'd like to know more than a guess.
So we know
If we
that,
have time to do that, because you want to decide right away on these things. But my concern is each one of these is a very personal decision for each employee. So whether there's a tax benefit or not, that's up to the employee to determine that value, whether they want to voluntarily do this or not. But I don't see it so much as smoke and mirrors, which kind of sounds to me like subversive. But what my concern is, if we have if we have employees volunteer to pay back the county, whatever, and this thing gets worse than it is, and then they lose their job, then they've almost taken a double hit, or a hit and a half.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I want to say at this point on 5 and 6.
so, okay. So you had asked if anyone had asked employees. And I'm sure that you're all aware that Mary Hall did a survey of her employees. We've not done anything more broadly. But if you're interested, we could certainly put a survey out to all employees and ask them how they would rank these proposals, as Mary did.
No other leader in the organization has done that yet?
Not
Just
yet.
Mary?
And we don't know what the outcome was with her folks at this point?
She sent all of us
Yeah, she sent
the
an email.
results of her survey. Did you not receive that, Commissioner?
I did not.
And that
So
too.
give me a minute.
Oh,
and probably
she
share my-
didn't send it to all the commissioners. My apologies.
So.
Oh, okay, well,
let me
that's
see.
why I didn't get
Do you
it.
mind- Can you share that, can you share your screen if you have it in front of you?
I will indeed share that. Let me clean off some of the other stuff on my screen so you see the right thing. And maximize this.
But do we know, we don't know, or do we know that Mary Hall, the elected auditor, she's the only one that has done this within her work unit? No one else has? Or we don't know if
She
they
is
have.
the only one who told us she had done this.
Okay.
Let's do it that way. So here are, in the auditor's office, they had 33 responses. What Mary told us she did is she took the original budget reduction concepts and had her staff rank those. And this is the result.
I have to say, for us to determine, to analyze this and determine if its value, that's gonna take a little time, I think, so.
Well, just think about if you send a survey to county employees as well.
I know that, but I'm looking for kind of a rough, what do you think, 10% gonna take advantage of it, 50%? I'm just, you know,
Yeah, that's too small a print and too much to digest for just
Yeah,
one
right
office
now,
at this
right.
point.
yeah.
So this is a lot of information. But what I'm saying is that this is one office, and that if you're interested, we can certainly do a very quick survey countywide.
I want to know what the electeds, the directors, and what the employees have to say. They all should have they have a voice. We need to hear what their input is, and then make the value judgment there.
All right. I'm trying to.
Did you have something, Ty?
I just was going to point out there were specific comments that were included. The only one related to this issue that Commissioner Edwards is asking about says, I do not like the voluntary option because I believe that the burden should be shared equally, not optionally.
Yeah.
And I received a couple of feedback from one of the directors, and just along the same terms as Commissioner Mister received. They will prefer not necessarily going through layoffs, but the pain should be shared equally across the board. They also, the directors provided to Robin and I some options that you may consider having a phase 1 through phase 4. Phase 1 is ongoing process improvements. Not quite sure what that really is. Number 2, position and purchasing holds, which is one of the elements that you have in here in the different strategies. Phase 3, allow voluntary leave without pay and voluntary staffing reductions. That is also part of, I believe, your many options. In phase 4, mandatory salary reductions and furloughs, which is also part of your many options you have in place. So this we received, Robin and I just want to make sure that I'm sure the directors are listening, that in fact they have shared those options with you.
Right. And you've received direct feedback from the elected officials in 2 meetings that were held with them.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe one comment on what Commissioner Menser brought out on the voluntary versus mandatory, I guess is where it is. And I tend to agree with whomever made that particular statement, that's worth considering. And if we're gonna do it, we ought to almost do it under 3 or 4. Probably 4, because if we do it under, for the juvenile, coroner, sheriff, corrections, we're just gonna have to pay backfill with overtime on that. So we're gonna have to almost exempt those groups and do it as per number 4, I guess.
Yeah.
As
If
far
you
as
were to do furlough.
considering it. Yes. But again, that would take a negotiated settlement, I suppose. I don't know, either that or a cut to each one of those entities of their respective dollar amount straight across the board. You know, that's another way that we could address that. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it, but anytime you get into the bargaining side of things, that takes a fair amount of time. And again, that's another good reason to implement our freeze sooner than later, as pointed out by Commissioner Menser.
Is Maria Ponte on the call at all, Romero?
No,
Okay.
but I can, what questions do you need, and we make sure we all will.
Nothing. I just want to be sure. I didn't know if she was listening or if she was available. I don't have a question for her, but it does require bargaining with the represented folks. But that's a significant amount of savings.
Right. So we left off when last we met. I think that we got through item number 15.
Good. And before you get to 15, I'm going to back up again. Going back to the number 4, the required furlough. And Commissioner Edwards is right. Bargaining takes considerable time, but the employees and their representatives understand we're under the gun and have to make pretty quick decisions. So I don't think it would be a typical negotiated type settlement, the time frame wise.
So that's why we are suggesting to you that we need at least 30 days and have a implementation date of July 1.
Right.
I do want to comment on that. I have lived through these exact type of bargaining situations where we actually asked those represented individuals, would you rather have layoffs in which, you know, last hired, first fired type of a philosophy, I guess, is in place? Or would you rather have cutbacks? And it ended up, in all the cases that I can remember that I had to deal with, they opted for laying off the junior employee rather than take cuts themselves. So that's been the history of taking that type of an action, in my estimation, dealing with hundreds of FTEs.
That's correct.
So,
That's been my experience as well.
okay, yeah.
They'll cut the bottom, as long as it doesn't impact their, themselves. But I don't know if that's changed with the demographics of today. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Robin.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, if it's
Hey, Robin,
agreeable to you, yes?
I have my notes from last week. With I think the board went through all the 16 items. And let me refresh the memory to the board as to how they decided to, and it was whether they'd like to continue to have those on the table or not. Certainly they can revisit that. Item number 1 decided to keep it, and number 2 decided to continue the conversations, that means.
Right.
Number 3, there was a split decision to keep it on the table. Commissioner Messer voted against it. Number 4, to keep it on the table to continue the conversation. It was a split decision. Commissioner Messer voted against it. Number 5, to keep it. Number 6, to keep it. Number 7 was decided unanimously to remove from the conversation. Number 8.
Which one was that, Romero, that got removed?
Number 7, which is to reduce the size of county government through layoffs. And that was 3-0.
Right.
I guess as you're going down this,
Yep.
I think all of the commissioners during that discussion period were saying, yeah, we want to do this or do that, but with the option of discussion and possibly having a change of heart.
Oh, yeah, you.
That was just kind of the last resort, I think, is the way I look at it.
I'm just going through with the discussion just to
Okay.
refresh your memory.
Yep.
I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do whatever you think is appropriate.
Yes, okay.
Number 8 to keep it, number 9 to keep it, number 10 to keep it, number 11 to keep it, number 12 to keep it, number 13 to remove it, and that was a 2-1 vote, and Commissioner Edwards voted against it. Number 14 to keep it, number 15 to keep it, and number 16 to keep it, and Robin added a new option on number 17.
Right. This is an early retirement option. We've not, excuse me, I put my mask on to cough.
This is number 17 now.
Number 17 is a new item on your list. It's one that has come up a number of times in conversations with employees and directors and elected officials. So we added it to the list. That's an early retirement option. We have not made any assumptions about this yet, but we did get it in front of you. Other jurisdictions are implementing this in the way I've seen it structured in the past is you give the appointing authority has the authority to say yes or no to the employee who wants to retire early. If the employer says yes, then the employee receives an early retirement bonus, often in the $10,000 range. And the position is then eliminated once the employee retires. And that's where the savings come from. So that's why you leave the final decision up to the elected official or department director, not the employee, because it has to be a position that the office or department is willing to eliminate.
So with that, I wrote down, of course, the buyout. What would it take to entice someone to take an early retirement or a retirement? But also, there would also be payout of accrued leave and such, and we don't have any idea what that number might look like because it's going to vary widely depending on the employee and what kind of time they have accumulated.
Yeah, that's a good.
Does all that come out of the general fund?
It depends on what fund the employees are paid out of. I would assume that you would offer, if this is a strategy that you chose, then we would offer that to all county employees. So maybe general fund, maybe a restricted fund. We wouldn't know until people started coming forward.
Okay.
I know that at the state, when it was offered, I saw it offered twice in my 26 years at the state, and one time extremely few people used it, and the other time it actually cost the state money, not saved.
I saw that utilized, I get just a moment, in City of Olympia in 08 or 9.
I think
And
they're
it started
offering
off-
it now.
And I think it was like, started off back then at like 5,000, then it went up to 10. And a lot of people were saying, I'm just going to wait. And as I recall, it got up to about $20,000 when people started bailing. I'm sorry, taking that option, 20 or so. So they're offering it now. Do you know what they're offering
I think
incentive-wise?
they're offering 10,000.
10, okay. Go ahead, Ty.
Yeah, I thought that it might be Olympia or somewhere. I'd heard the structure as being that it's a buyout, $10,000, and then not that you eliminate the position, because if you limit it to that, you're not going to get any, because most of the departments aren't going to want to lose that position. I mean, it would be this confluence, the stars aligning of somebody in that position with that kind of a longevity or whatever. So that's not going to do much. But what I heard was that you have to, you require them to leave it vacant for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. Or I guess you could, another variant could be subjecting it to a overarching hiring freeze. So you're creating some more positions to be subject to your freeze, and then it would be a sort of an indeterminate time that it would lift, but you would not lose the position if you were, say, the auditor or whoever. Is that, I mean, I just think that if you're going to structure it as you do it and you lose a position, where no one's going to choose that. You might have 2 or 3 in the whole county.
You would very likely have very few people who were interested and approved, which again, I saw it done twice at the state. I think, in my opinion, that's why we saw very few in one of those rounds. And when they structured it to where the position was simply subject to the hiring freeze, that's when the state lost money doing early retirement. That's why the second time they did it, they required that the position actually be eliminated.
And back in 08 or 9, I believe that's what the City of Olympia did. There was that requirement of the position is eliminated. And I don't recall if there was a time frame. I know it wasn't 6 months. I don't know if it was a year or so, but there may not have been a time frame.
It needs
Romero?
to be held long enough to recoup the cost, at
Yep.
least, and then and have the savings. So
Right.
it has to be held for quite a while.
Go ahead, Romero.
So this option is always based on a personal decision, I believe. And so any employee who may want to take an early retirement, they need to make a decision. Whatever the incentive the organization is going to be providing is going to backfill perhaps the penalties in this case a PERS 2 may have by early retirement. So and I think that's what all of you stated, Commissioner Hutchins, is started 5,000 back in 2000 and went all the way to 20,000 when more people. It's really a financial decision. Whether they see the reduction in benefits as a result of early retirement from the state retirement system, if that makes sense on the incentive that we provide. A couple of weeks ago, when we had a conversation with the state legislators as to some options that perhaps they may consider on this special session will be to soften some of the penalties for a certain period of time for those individuals for those employees who may want to take an early retirement without having to face the penalties, at least on the PERS 2. And that is probably right now the bulk of most of the employees under the state retirement system in PERS 2. So we will continue to work that. I don't know how successful that is, but that is going to be another avenue as to how the state can soften those penalties. And maybe we'll see more employees they may take in retirement.
I guess I'd like to point out just a little something here. I think that there's a big difference in what we're dealing with today versus what went on in 2008. In 2008, it was a financial meltdown caused by poor practices, probably having to do with banking as much as anything else, but bloated real estate prices and the financing that got in behind those. Today, we're in a situation that we've kind of self-induced this depression, if you will, to solve a particular problem, that being the health issue. So I think we're going to see a difference in how people react to that, and our rebound is going to be different if we can ever open up government in a timely fashion. And I think that is what is so crucial, that we do get this opened up again. I hope the governor's listening, but I know he's got the ultimate say. We'll see what happens. But there is a big difference in how this recovery can come about versus 2008.
So this sheet that we're working from says it's a potential 6-month savings. However, these options that we may implement or will implement go beyond 6 months, don't they?
I would say that we need to plan to implement them at least through the end of 2021.
Right.
And one of the things that we've been working on is budget instructions for building next biennium's budget. We have asked you right now to focus on 2020 and the immediate concerns, and then we have to figure out what we're going to put in the instructions for building budgets for next biennium. So in our budget instructions, which are due out in early July, and I think we're going to do it in late June. Yep, late June. We need some guidance from the board on the process for building next biennium's budget, but we needed to get through what this immediate concern is first. So once we get through this, then I'll be talking to you about a longer term strategy.
Number 2 is directly related to number 17. Because if people want to retire, and then they're looking at it might be minuscule, but they're looking at their average final salary, and it's going to be reduced, that might entice them to leave early, because this is not going to be a 6-month gig. It's going to be at least a year and a half. And that would reduce their final average salary a tiny bit. But that might be enough to incentivize someone to say, you know what, I'll take that 10 grand and leave.
So I think that our retirement is based on consecutive highest years. Is it 5 highest years? Yes.
5 to 16 months. Okay.
Yep. So if they received a reduction in that last year, then that wouldn't be part of the 5 highest, or maybe it would. Maybe that year's higher than it was 4 years ago. But they'll take the consecutive years, the 5 highest consecutive years.
5 highest. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
One point on that. I don't think this recovery has to be a year and a half. If we get with the Economic Development Council, eliminate those regulatory issues so that we can be prepared for this economic boom that I feel can start this year, probably in the fall, if we get away from this bureaucratic roadblock that's in our way that's slowing our recovery possibility. So I just want to point that out. The quicker we get with the EDC, implement what they're going to be recommending, very much like we did for the Master Builders Association, I think we can get on the rebound quicker and we won't have to be laid up for so long. And that's because we have this situation because government created this on their own as an artificial depression versus in 2008 where it was a buildup to a bursting bubble, if you will. Just
So I would,
point of interest.
I only take exception with one of the things you said. I believe we can start sooner. Not that we're going to start sooner, that this boom is coming though. But I don't think it's bureaucracy that's holding it every bit back. It's the Thurston County Board of Health, the State Board of Health. I mean, it's a health issue. It's not just an economic issue. And you can't, if you don't have healthy people, you're not going to have a healthy economy. So we have to have the people continue to be healthy, and then we start opening up. And I think then that recovery and boom is going to happen. And I'm very hopeful for that. But I don't think it's just bureaucracy that was artificially causing what the bubble, or not the bubble, the depression that we're in right now.
No, it was a medical emergency is what's causing it right now. And I'm saying we can recover much faster if we get the bureaucracy out of the way so we can create jobs. And I'll just use that one development of 600 homes as an example. If you want to see if bureaucracy is still alive and functioning properly, let's see how long it takes this applicant to be able to move forward and create those jobs based on that application that was turned in on Monday.
And for the public that's watching, we are engaged with the EDC and the Chamber and helping to fund the Thurston Strong to get things going again, just to that end, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'm going to suggest that we take a thumbs up, thumbs down on whether or not we leave early retirement option on the table, then take a short break and continue down the list with page 2 after the break.
So we're going to go through the list again, thumbs up or down, and then take a break?
We're going to
17.
continue because there are many more items on your list that we've not talked about at all yet.
Yeah, you already provided thumbs up, thumbs down on 1 through 16. So the only new item before you is number 17.
Right, so are you, you want to leave this on the table, early retirement? I
As
see
an
one
option?
thumb.
I'm not in favor of an early retirement because I think in the long run, it's gonna cost more money by the time we do the bonus, the buyout, whether or not we're gonna eliminate an FTE. I mean, we can always talk about it, but at this point, I'm not in favor of an early retirement option because I think it does tie in with 2. So anyway, but any of it is worth talking about as far as I'm concerned.
That's
And
what we're doing.
Yeah, okay.
We didn't have any comparison, or do we have a comparison from 09 early retirement? Was that not?
No, this county did not offer early retirement option.
Okay, and I want to keep it on just because it is a personal choice. If I want to, I'll take advantage of it. It'll impact the county, but we don't know which fund it'll impact. But I want to leave it on there because it's a personal choice someone may want to opt into. They opt in to opt out.
So Commissioner Messer, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't really like this thumbs up, thumbs down on these because I'm kind of with Commissioner Edwards. I don't see it as a high choice for me if I were to rank them because I'm not sure it's going to give us much result. And it sounds like a lot of cumbersome administrative work to create not that much result. But, you know, I'm willing to keep it on the table for the time being.
Yeah, I have nothing against keeping it on the table. I just don't think it's practical. I don't mind talking about it though.
I mean, to give a thumbs down, I guess, is saying I would never do that.
Yeah, and
I don't know that there's anything on here I would never do.
You can always pull something back onto the table that you take off. Right now, we're just asking you, will you leave it on the table for consideration?
So the intent is to reduce the number of options.
Yes, we are trying.
Right, and if we,
We're not asking you to never consider this, is to facilitate your decision-making process. Hopefully we can get to a point, hopefully by next Friday, with a very consolidated decision. We're not trying to influence we're just trying to facilitate your decision-making process by reducing the options that you may consider. That's all the intent of this conversation at this point.
and if number 17 was the only option, or maybe one of 3 options we were going to choose, it's not going to save us. It's not going to get us out of the dark. but cumulatively, it could help if we eliminated the position. All right, so what do you want to do, Robin?
So is this one staying on the table or not?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, it's still on the table.
I mean,
Okay,
here's
so-
the deal on that though. You're coming to the board and you don't have any assumptions developed yet. That's what I don't know. I don't understand. You're asking us to make a decision on facts that we don't have. And
Right now, we're not
that bothers me. You
Right
know?
now, we're not asking for a decision on whether or not to do it. We want to know if you're willing to talk about it more.
Well, I'm
because
willing to
if
talk
you
about
are-
any of it. I'm kind of with Commissioner Menzer on that. I'm willing to talk about anything that's gonna help. That's where I'm at.
Great. So we're leaving it on the table for now, and we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue with item number 18 on page 2. How long of a break, Mr. Chairman? 10 minutes?
10 minutes, is that sufficient?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, 10 minutes. So we'll be back at 10:37-ish. To the Thurston County General Fund Budget Reduction Concept discussion. And it's May 14, 2020. And we're going to pick up where we left off. And I'm going to start with Romero.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. When we left off, you reviewed the items 1 through 17. And considering, the robust discussion that you had on all the different items, my suggestion will be to talk about a letter that we have attached to your documents. And maybe I would like to suggest for your consideration to take a moment to read that. But for the public's perspective, this is a letter the staff has prepared for you to consider sending to all the elected offices and departments for each head of the office as well as appointed director to prepare and send a reduction plan by next week of 15%. So what is this letter is going to do is will allow each of the offices and departments to give you a perspective as to how they will be implementing a budget reduction by 15%. And has a specific, very tight timelines as to when they need to submit those plans by next week. And that will be a good piece of information, at least from my point of view, that will help you to make the decisions that you need to make in terms of budget reductions.
All right.
I would also
Right.
mention that in last week's packet, we provided you with target amounts and what those targets would look like for 6 months or 12 months. And we calculated them at, I think, 10, 15, and 20% for all funds in every office and department. And for some reason, I'm not able to put my hand on my copy, but it was in your packet last week.
In the second paragraph of the letter, it lays it out, the kind of fix that we're in economically. And I heard last night a news report regarding a world economist or an economist saying that the world economy has had a negative turn of about 3% or 3.3%. And that does rival, it equals, if not betters, on the negative side, the Great Depression, which is really scary worldwide.
Ramiro, in paragraph 3,
Yes, sir.
third line, middle, the word should be losses, not loses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's me.
So if the board is okay with this approach, again, this approach is to ask each office and departments to come up with, from their own perspective, as to how they can probably suggest to you reduce their specific budgets by 15%. This is an avenue, and that way you get feedback directly from each office and department. If that is the case, we can probably prepare this letter for signature, send that today, and see where it goes. So I'd like to hear your perspective on this proposal.
Hang on, Gary. Is it realistic to, even if they get the letter today, to have a proposal submitted by Tuesday?
So we would, go ahead, Romero.
That is a very difficult question. I think it's going to create a lot of work, no doubt in my mind. But I think we need to, I believe we need to get to that point because time is of the essence.
I agree. I just don't want to set an unreasonable expectation. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I guess, I wonder if this isn't the time to put in there that we are implementing a hiring freeze, kind of to make the point.
Good point.
I I don't have a problem with the letter as long as, I would just like to say, and I don't know, it could be added to the letter in a sentence, but just that this isn't necessarily how we're going to go about doing things. This is an exercise that then the board can use as a piece of information in our decision making.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm okay with that, yeah.
I don't have anything against that, but I really do think if we better get off the dime and do a hiring freeze. We don't need to talk about a select one right now, but at least to let folks know that we are in a projected pickle here.
I'm okay with including that in this letter
Yeah,
because
put it
we
in the
pretty much
letter.
decided that last week unanimously.
Yeah.
Well, so if we're gonna, I don't have any objection to making a move today on something that we all agree on, but when it comes to the hiring freeze, like by my estimation, there's 4 strategies here that are kind of variants of the hiring freeze. And I think we need to, if we're gonna make a decision today, we need to have a discussion about the pros and cons of each variant. There's number 8, number 9, number 10, and number 12, which all are things that you wouldn't do them all. They're all kind of different ways of dealing with folks that you haven't hired yet. Don't hire anyone, holding things vacant for numbers of months, not hiring things that were adopted in the last budget, and then eliminating positions that have been vacant. I mean, if we can agree as a board or come to or have a vote and a discussion on which of those, then I'm happy to do that today if everybody thinks it's important to do that piece of it immediately.
And I appreciate that. Hiring freeze is one of the strategies as you consider many. Maybe they probably by sending this letter, some of the offices and departments may suggest to you they're willing to freeze and eliminate some positions that are currently vacant. So that is the purpose of having their feedback, which a hiring freeze on their own departments or office may be a strategy.
Well, I think that we're in the driver's seat here, and if we're gonna ask them to go through this exercise, we should put the hiring freeze in place right now. We can say, yet to be determined, or as we get farther down, we'll make adjustments as needed. But I really think to set the tone of the seriousness of this operation we're undertaking, that does it. That lets people know.
I agree, but if we do that, put that in, and you say we'll discuss it later or not amend, but massage it later, I would like it, we're gonna have to build in exemptions for any of those positions that directly impact public safety or essential to health and welfare activities of the county. I'd want to eliminate positions that generate revenue. Of course, a standard statutory requirement, we can't not hire those folks. So there has to be some exemptions in there with the hiring freeze.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't mind putting that in there either. I mean, that's the reality of doing business, but if we don't at least talk, I believe the governor did hiring freezes here in the last day or so. And I think it sets the seriousness of what we're faced with today.
I guess I don't know. This letter sounds pretty serious to me, and I'm not sure that throwing the hiring freeze language into this letter really changes anything. I think all of our department heads know how serious this is, and when we're asking them to plan for a 15% cut, they're going to understand that this is a big deal. So I don't know about that. And again, I'm not opposed to making a decision. I just want to have a hiring freeze, just throwing that, and Commissioner Hutchings just pointed out some of the nuances, and Robin has pointed out some of the nuances. I just want to make sure that we dial it up right. It's not just one thing. There are variants, and they all have different numbers associated with them in terms of what we potentially save. So I just want to make sure we get the right variant. I'm certainly in favor of some form of a hiring freeze.
Well, I'm thinking of this out loud, but if we just send a letter without that piece in it, I think most of them will come back with, well, we're going to have a hiring freeze, and that's going to take care of a percentage. But if we already say this is already part of it, now do another 15% on top of that, now we're cutting a little bit thinner. Am I wrong in that assumption?
I agree with you.
So that might be the perception, Commissioner, right? Because if you're making a sort of hiring freeze and then asking for an additional 15%, then some offices in the department may see you're asking more than just 15%.
So we could clarify it, though, to say, to identify the positions that they're going to hold vacant due to the freeze, count those savings, and then what else will you do? You could structure it that way.
What kind of freeze, the hiring freeze itself, what kind of savings percentage-wise is that?
It completely depends on how you roll it out. If there's going to be some positions that are exempted, if you're going to allow offices or departments to come in and make a case for why a position should be exempted.
Okay. So we don't know that.
It all depends. That's why our estimate is rough and just an estimate.
Yeah, and that is a good answer, I believe, is all depends, because whether you want to consider hiring freeze for those positions that have been vacant for 6 months, or you want to consider hiring freeze for the positions that are currently vacant, period, with exceptions. So all of those are the dynamics the board needs to have discussion related to this item.
If Commissioner Menzer is not too crazy about that move, how about if we did something like be aware, or stated something like be aware any hiring from this date forward could be subject to layoff or something like that, so that they're made aware that we got problems. I don't see, this isn't strong enough to me. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's just direction for an exercise. I want to put the framework in there. We've already begun. Now join in. What else can you do? What else can you offer? And we're prepared to do more, obviously.
I think this conversation related to hiring freeze, and I'm sure there's a lot of offices and departments are watching this conversation. So they understand the seriousness of the issue that we're dealing with, as well as the public.
That's a good point. I know they're watching. So, Ty, you're not in favor of, you're not wanting the freeze put in the letter?
It just depends how it's worded, I guess. I don't have a problem with Commissioner Edwards' idea of putting something in there that kind of gives a preview that at a minimum we're going to be, we've already, we're going to be doing something like that. I don't know. I just think that, I guess I'm just not sure that it's that critical of a thing to be spending our time. I mean, we have less than an hour now to get through. We haven't even gotten through our sheet. So I'm trying to figure out how to best use our time. But I mean, it sounds like all three commissioners are in favor of some variant of the hiring freeze. So to put that in the letter seems fine.
Okay.
Just to be tricky how to word it, since we haven't decided on exactly what it's the rollout and the nuances are going to be.
That means right.
But if we say something like commissioners intend to implement a hiring freeze effective
Today.
okay. Effective.
I just think it's important. We can even refer to the governor's situation. We can
Right.
refer to that.
Maybe because
What we don't have is the details. So
Yeah.
if we put something in the letter to the effect of commissioners intend for there to be a hiring freeze effective on pick a date, and we will get the details to you in a week, because we will meet next week and you can hash it out then.
Because it is you're not going to be implementing a blanket hiring freeze. The discussion was on those terms. There's going to be some exceptions on that, and we need to make sure that we are
Flesh that out.
Yeah. So my suggestion, if in fact you want to have a statement on the hiring freeze effective certain date, my suggestion for you will be to consider a date after next Friday, because next Friday is when you're going to make a holistic
Okay,
decisions.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. But at least
So
at a
we would
minimum,
make
a
it
hiring freeze.
effective like May
June 1st.
20,
June 1st.
June 1st would be my preference. But
That gives you a week after our decision making next week to
Yeah, to narrow down, yeah.
iron out any
hire
details.
fast.
Yeah.
Well, I would put in there realizing any recent hiring is going to be looked at. I don't know, I think it's worth mentioning. The economy is bad, applicants are readily available to be hired, and I think it does them a disservice if we don't at least talk about the possibility that they're gonna get laid off.
Well, and then everybody knows that we're looking at furloughs, looking at layoffs. And if anybody were to take that June 1st and say, well, man, I'm gonna hire somebody right now. I just don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think it's realistic. But maybe a wording, and I don't want to get stuck on semantics, that says at the very least, at least we're looking at a hiring freeze. Rather than just, hey, we're doing this. And that's the very minimum. Anyway, I'll leave it to you to come up with that wording and run it,
So just to maybe come to a conclusion on this item, if I may.
please.
So what I'm hearing is the board is interested in, on a letter, send it to all the offices and departments, asking them to submit a plan by next week as to how we're gonna be implementing budget reductions by 15%. We will fix the typo on paragraph 3. We add language related to the board will consider a hiring freeze by June 1st. Details will follow. And also we will add another paragraph or statement that this exercise is to provide the board with other options, but ultimately the board will be the one who makes the final decision.
That's fine.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
Okay.
So we'll draft that final letter. Hopefully we can have your signature today, and then we'll send that out hopefully by the end of today as well.
All right, got it. Thank you for that. Now we're going to jump into the COVID-19.
So we are going to not continue down the rest of the list at this time. We'll continue next Wednesday down the reduction list. And instead, we're going to turn to the COVID-19 grant funding that the county has received and spend the next 45 minutes on that, or as long as you should choose to continue. And if there's time at the end, then we can go back to the reduction list, but it's important for you to take a look at the grants. The first item that Amy has delivered in your new packet is a list. It's a, let's see how this printed. Yep. It's a 2-page list of the part of the grants that the county is aware of that we will receive to date. This is what we know so far. So I'm just going to
Mr.
put.
King.
Yeah. I'm just
Right.
flashing the document.
Yep.
It's a spreadsheet.
It's a worksheet, and the title is Thurston County State and Federal Grants for COVID-19 Response. So, starting on page 1, we just wanted to make sure you're aware of all of the money that is coming in that we know of so far. Under CDBG, we are receiving, and I'm going to put these in round numbers, we are receiving $718,000. And you are currently working with the other jurisdictions to determine a method of how to allocate that money. We have received from the state of Washington, this is not a federal award, this is a state award, an emergency housing grant of just under $1 million. Comes from the Washington State Department of Commerce, It is from Washington State House Bill 2965, I think is the bill number. That bill includes a clause that says if we receive federal money that can be used for the same purpose, that we have to pay this money back. We are currently, actually, WASAC is in negotiation on our behalf, and we have talked to our legislative delegation about amending the bill so that the state can retain the money that would pay back the budget stabilization fund of the state of Washington, can hold back money from the additional 200 million that they're holding that could be distributed to local jurisdictions rather than asking us to pay this $1 million back.
Is that
Moving on
is
to-
it, Robin, are you talking about the same fund, 200, wasn't it 240 million they're holding or something?
Yeah, that's part of the
Yeah.
CARES Act, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we want them to take any clawback off the top, not have us all pay. So we're working on that. Otherwise, we would have to pay this $1 million back out of the CRF money. The next item on the list, we have received an award from it's called the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program. It's from the Department of Justice. It is CARES Act funding. It came through Department of Justice. It's just under $80,000. It can only be used for law enforcement response, and the sheriff will use this money to purchase gas masks. The next item is FEMA disaster relief. We don't know yet how much that's going to be. We're working constantly with FEMA on what is and is not eligible, but what has become absolutely clear is that FEMA is the funder of last resort. They will not pay for any cost that is covered under any other budget. And so the amount that we get from FEMA will depend not only on our expenditures, but also on what can be paid out of other funds. Next on your list is funding for public health. It's the Health and Human Services Center for Disease Control. The CDC is the federal part of the money, and part of it is state. Again, from Washington State, engrossed House Bill 2965. It's roughly half and half. So of the 650,000, I think 308,000 is state and the remainder is federal. This money must be used for public health. And I think that the performance period on this is it has to be spent. It's 1 year from the notice of award, which I think was early April. So we would have until April of 2021 to obligate the funds and an additional 3 months to spend them. But it must be used for public health. And this is what you approved through the CON.
In this past Tuesday, you amended the current contract with the state to receive this money, as you may recall.
Right, the consolidated contract, or the CON for public health. We believe the next item that there is funding from SAMHSA, that's the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, that can be used for behavioral health clinics. We don't think that that would come through Thurston County. We think that that would come through the I'm sorry, what's their new acronym, the BHA?
BHASO.
Okay. It would come through the behavioral health organization rather than the county. So we are not tracking whether or not they have applied for that grant. The next item is the also from the CARES Act. It's Help America Vote Act funding. It must be used solely to enhance security and response related to safety, keeping people safe when they vote. 330,000 roughly has been awarded through the Secretary of State to the Thurston County Auditor. And again, it has to be used specifically for elections. Turning the page, there is an economic adjustment assistance program that we believe would come through the county. We are currently in the process of applying for that award. We don't know yet how much it might be. And last is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or the CRF. This is the $15.7 million that so many of us are talking about. It has broad uses, although there are some very specific things that we cannot use it for. The federal government has been very clear that it cannot be used for lost revenue or anything that was in our budget prior to March 27th of 2020. So that's the list, and the known amount of money that we're bringing into the county at this point is $18.5 million. That sounds like a lot of money, and it's really not. And Romero and I can both tell you that the ideas of how to spend this money are far more than $18 million would get us. So there are many needs. Before I move on and we talk specifically about the CRF, do you have any questions about any of these grants?
Yes. I just want to point out, it's not so much a question, but maybe you have an answer. Is the CDBG grant for $718,000 roughly? That's phase one of about 3 additional ones that may be coming?
I don't know. Romero,
one being sometime
are
in
you
the
aware
fall.
of additional phases of CDBG?
And I have not seen anything in writing, but I've heard that perhaps is another allocation from CDBG might be coming, but I have not seen anything in writing or for sure.
Yeah, nor have I, but I heard that in one of our web or Zoom meetings yesterday with the other county mayors and staff, that there's supposed to be 3 additional ones coming, the final one being sometime in the fall. And so can't decipher that fact or fiction. I thought you might have insider information.
No factual information, Commissioner.
Okay.
I had a question on economic adjustment assistance. Where is that a law that passed from the federal government you said you don't know what the amount would be?
That is part of the CARES Act, and I believe that Joe Wolf and Jenica are working on the application for that.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions?
No other questions about these awards? We continue to scrub the bills that Congress has passed to see if there are any other opportunities, and we're keeping our ears open and constantly looking at our to our partners in WASAC and NACO to tell us if there are any other ways that we can have access to funding for the county or funding that would come through the county. But this is what we know at this time. So the next item we can look at is, I think you're aware that we've formed a committee. Everything's done by committee. We formed a team on fiscal response. And the team developed this tracking tool. That's why I can easily present to you, here's the grants we know. we've been talking a lot in the team about how do we choose which grant we charge first. So another item in your packet, the next item is this flow chart. This is an early draft, so we're refining it, and I'll have a better one for you next week. But we wanted you to see some of the things that the finance team is talking about when we talk about how do we choose which grant to charge. So the first question is, we have an expense, right? We know we're spending money. And so is that expense something that we can charge to a grant that has a restricted use? If the answer is yes, first we would use the restricted grants. If no, then is there a grant that this cost fits in where it aligns with a priority that the board has set? Yes, charge that. No, look for the next thing. Is there a time-limited grant? Now, all of these grants are time-limited, but they have different timelines. So the public health money's got until April of next year. The CDBG money is a 2-year span. I think September of 2022 is the period of performance on that. The CRF is, I hesitate on that because I'm accustomed to saying CFR. It's Code of Federal Regulations, so I have to twist it around to refer to this fund. So the CRF is time limited. We have to spend it by October 31st of this year, or the state will take it back. So is there something time limited? Charge it there if it's eligible. If not, do we have grants with without a significant match that we could charge it to? And if nothing else fits, can we charge it to Fema as the funder of last resort? So we want to make sure we use every dollar, and the fiscal response team is shifting into starting to track how much has been spent, which, by the way, is currently 1.7 million to date that the county has spent in response. And we're starting to align those costs with the grant that we would charge. So that's part of the work that the committee is doing. Any questions about that?
I do. Last time we chatted about this, we were asking about about the CRF covering the hazard pay, and it was kind of dicey. You weren't sure if we could. We talked about stretching it. You weren't sure if we could. So when I'm looking at the Coronavirus Relief Fund use guidelines under the non-allowable expenditures, almost to the bottom of that non-allowable expenditures bullet list, it says what's not allowed is workforce bonuses other than hazard pay or overtime. So does that mean it will cover the hazardous pay? We'll get reimbursed for that, even though it's going to the county sheriff, who's not dedicated specifically to COVID response.
So when you look, I don't have the FAQ document.
Want me to run it down to you?
One of the FAQs for the coronavirus is specifically about hazard pay. And I really need that document in my hand.
Amy gave you a document. I believe Commissioner Hutchins is referring to page 3 of that document, and behind that is FAQs.
Which paragraph on 3?
Yeah, I don't have the.
It's, where is this?
Is it the May 4th one, or the?
Yeah, it
Is
would
it
be
May 4th
later
or
one.
April 22nd?
The packet that Amy just gave you today.
Oh, no.
So I don't have Amy's.
On page 2?
It starts with an email from Joe Blow. I think Amy's listening, so she'll deliver a copy to you.
Oh, I've got it.
It's
There it
page
is.
4.
You said, thank you. When you said email from Joe Wolf, got it. So after page 3.
So page 3 is what
Yeah.
Commissioner Hutchins is referring to.
Okay, and which bullet?
Ineligible cost, and that's bullet number 6.
Number 6.
Right. I
I was
saw
looking at a different
that.
document. It's the same thing.
Then we got more clarification on the FAQs, which is why I was hesitant. We think that the hazard pay will qualify. To do workers' comp,
Under 4, 5, or 6, which one are we under? Under 4, 5, or 6 on page 3.
Talking about this page 3.
Well, even the document that we just went through.
This email that I just gave you.
Right, it specifically says that.
It's on the 4th page of this document we were just going over with COVID. The CARES Act.
3, got it? And number 6. Okay.
I see that, and there is another part of the FAQs that address hazard pay, and that's what I'm looking for. So my quick answer is we think hazard pay will qualify. We can try to claim it and see if it's accepted. We've asked specifically about the hazard pay for our law enforcement officers. But what I'm looking for has guidance about how it has to be a COVID case
Hey,
that
Robin,
the person is interacting
Hey,
with.
Robin, what you're looking for, I believe,
Thank you, Romero.
is under the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and that's the guidance dated April 22nd, 2020. Are you there?
Which page?
Right, and following to that is the
Okay, I think it's on page 2, right towards the bottom, and it's right above the payroll expenses for public safety, public health expenses such as, so it's under 2, expenses for public safety measures undertaken in response to COVID-19. When you're out there wrestling with these people that you don't know, that's what I'm calling combat pay.
Where are you?
I'm on page 2 of the April 22nd guidance.
Okay. And what bullet, what number? On page
Down right above where it says right above the payroll expenses for public safety.
Got
There's two dots right above there. So it's the second dot up, in which it's a public health expenses such as expenses for public safety measures undertaken in response to COVID-19. That's the only reason we're doing it, is because
Yeah.
of COVID-19.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I agree with that. It's the only reason.
So again, my short answer is we think it is a qualified cost. We've asked the question and I can't find the thing that I am specifically looking for. And I will find that and get it to you.
I actually heard this discussed on one of the webinars that I participated on, and they indicated it definitely was a valid expenditure.
Great. So that
Well, that was the only question I had.
a lot of time spent on that. So moving on, there are many other broad uses for the coronavirus fund. And those include both internal and external purposes. So as you see on the guidance, Eligible expenditures include but are not limited to medical expenses, public health expenses.
Okay, where are you at now?
I am on page 2 of the April 22nd, and I'm just hitting the high notes because I assume that I know that you've all gotten a lot of information about this fund. So it can be used for payroll expenses for employees who are substantially dedicated to responding to the coronavirus or COVID-19. We can use the money for actions to facilitate compliance with public health measures. We can use the money for provision of economic support to both private and nonprofit in the private sector. We have Attorney General guidance, and we're getting clarity on that, at what point that crosses the line into gift of public funds. We have to be careful of that when we're considering payments to the private sector. And then it has a broad allowance for other related expenses to the response to COVID-19. So this is pretty broad money. And what I guess I'm looking for from you, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to Romero here, is we're looking for guidance on how you would like to split that money up, if you will, or priorities for spending the money.
Well, before we are able to open up the entire county business-wise, public health is working with private businesses and restaurants in helping establish guidelines and safety precautions so they can open up to the public and engage again. But we currently only have 3 contact tracer investigators, and we're going to need a heap more of those folks. And we're going to have to increase testing, I would imagine. We're going to have to do that. And we're paying currently for quarantining. I don't think we have anybody that we're paying for quarantining, but we have expenses reserving rooms at the Governor House for quarantine. So I don't know what those expenses are going to entail, but to help the economic piece, we're going to have testing in place and more contact tracers. Because somebody gets sick, it takes one individual several days to figure out and track down everybody that's been in contact with them. Right off the top.
So Shelley is preparing a plan for how they intend to use the additional $650,000 that you just authorized in the CONCON. We don't know if part of that money will be used for case tracking or case investigation or testing. We're waiting to see Shelley's plan.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. The CRF could be used for that purpose.
And also portions of the $999,000 grant that we received from Commerce has been set aside for isolation and quarantine.
Okay. And so it's an allowable expense then to hire personnel.
Yes, personnel who are dedicated to response and recovery.
Devoted to this, okay. But then when this pandemic becomes just a epidemic and then reduce it down to our new level of abnormal, do we keep those folks or do we lay them off, or is that just a decision made down the road? Or when funding is ended, what's the end date?
So the end date on the CRF is October 31st of this year. The CONCON money is about April of 2021. I'm not sure what the timeline is on the emergency homeless grant. I would have to check when that,
That one
but
has
I
a
don't
little,
think it could be used for those
yeah,
purposes.
it has a little more flexibility, and also the CDBG money has additional flexibility in terms of the timing as well. Yeah.
All right. What was the CDBG money, that's 718, the end of this year?
No,
No,
that,
sir.
that is good until September of 2022.
Okay.
Miro, you were talking, back when we were discussing CDBG, you were talking about the set aside for the economic development activities that EDC was proposing. And can this month, it looks to me like what I'm reading here is that that would directly fall under this larger pool of money, which would, in my opinion, be a more appropriate
Yeah,
place to support that that program.
thank you. I was in the process of providing a suggestion to the board about a process, first of all, as to how you may consider spending the $15.7 million. If this is the right timing?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
No, I thought you were still having questions on the different grants.
No, I don't.
Okay, you're good?
Well, I guess I'd like to just say one thing before we get into that. I don't know if my seatmates, have they had this guidance from April 22nd and April 4th all along? So it sounded like some of you had it and some didn't have it. That's what I'm wondering about, because I think it's very pertinent that we read this and be aware of it. I know you've just given out something that's got some more information in it, but I think this is a good basis to review these two guidance papers, one from April 22nd and one from May 4th. Okay,
I have not had that all along, no.
okay, well,
But it's
you need to look at it.
It's pretty much what you've heard in so many different webinars.
Yeah.
Right, but it's concise and it's, the verbiage is pretty plain there, so you're not listening to somebody's interpretation of how they think it should be. You get to read it yourself.
Okay, so let's talk about that, the 15.7 million and the contribution to the EDC or the chamber before we run out of too much time.
May I start with the process first, Commissioner?
Please.
A suggestion will be out of the $15.7 million, there's already some expenditures incurred, as Robin already stated, that we need to send those for get reimbursed. And so I believe Robin has said it about between $1.7, $1.8 million. So suggestion will be right off the top to make sure that we get reimbursed for those expenditures already incurred. The second suggestion will be for you to consider to set aside two buckets. One bucket for supporting outside entities, if that is the right word, and a bucket to address internal county needs. Keeping in mind, the key is we need to have the expenditures be made by October 31st, 2020. So this funding cannot be done on an ongoing basis because we will not be able to qualify for that. So it has to be a one-time expense, and that expense needs to occur, in my words, ASAP, because October 31st is ASAP. Next week, you heard from the webinar on Tuesday, we will be receiving an award letter from Commerce, hopefully early in the week. And also they will give us a template of the contract they're planning to implement with the county. They also give us some feedback as to what is it that we need to do, the 3 pieces of documents that we need to submit with every single reimbursement process. In each of those activities, it has to be a certification that needs to go with each of those requests. Each of those requests and activities have to pass the 5-question test. So the proposal that we have for you is hopefully to streamline that process. Obviously, at the end of the day, the board has to make a decision, what is it that you like to fund. So my suggestion will be for you to set aside $1 million out of the remainder for an outside purposes. And I have a proposal what that is. And the remainder, it will be just about maybe about $12.5 million to start funding projects and programs internal to the county. We have a proposal in terms of how we can get that process in place. And attached to this document, this spreadsheet document in the back is a simple application process that if you agree with this, we will be sending to all departments and offices to submit projects for consideration. And behind that is a series of allowable costs, is a little bit revised version of what you have in front of you. So at least the offices and departments will have a guidance as to how those projects can be submitted to you. Not to you, sorry. So in the process, as soon as we get all those proposals, we have a technical team in place. They will review those applications and provide recommendations for an ultimate decision to the board. Because I don't think the board will have time to look every single application and go through that vetting process. So we have a technical team in place. That is the proposal in terms of the internal process. So to go back, $15.7 million, we're gonna take the $1.7 million already expended, and that will take us down to 14. My suggestion will be to set aside $1 million out of that for external purposes, and the remainder 13 will be for this internal process that I just laid out for you. Related to the external allocation, my suggestion for you to consider will be for you to support the Economic Development Council through the Thurston Strong. And I'm not suggesting to give the entire allocation to them, because there is an option on this funding that we can probably have grants to specific businesses. But it will be extremely tasking for us to manage that process because we'll have so many agreements and so many memorandums. But the EDC and the Thurston Strong already have the structure as to how they can manage that distribution to small businesses. In terms of recovery of those businesses, you can determine how much money that is. There is also other outside entities that may be in need of this funding. And again, that's the proposal from the staff. Set aside $1 million out of this money, and the remainder will be through the internal process that I just described.
Okay, I have a question. Earlier, you said 2.5 million set aside for the county, and now we're 13. Is there?
No.
Did I miss 500,000 somewhere here?
No. So, right, 15.7.
Yeah.
Off the top, let's take the 1.7 already expenditures.
Yeah.
So that takes us to 14.
14, got it.
Set aside $1 million for external needs.
Okay.
That will put us to 13 million.
Okay. So. Okay.
For the internal process. Anything you'd like to add? Anything, Robin, on that description?
I guess I would add that depending on the items that we get back from offices and departments, you could always choose to allocate more to the community in a month or two.
Right.
Go ahead, Ty.
Robin's point is exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, why don't we just use why don't we use this as a starting point? And as we evaluate these internal proposals, we can always make an amendment and say, let's shift more money out. So I think that makes sense to me.
That's really the intent. It's just as a good starting point, as a point of conversation.
Okay. Gary?
Which block of money are we talking about dedicating to the Economic Development Council's operation, or you said there's another overarching group?
Yeah, out of my suggestion of the set aside of the $1 million.
Is that going to be adequate for what they've got in mind, especially if they try to do some grant assistance to small businesses in our community? Or that you're thinking we can come back and look at the 13 million after that? Have they made an estimate yet?
That is an excellent question, because I don't think that there is not enough money
Well, no, we're
to
never
address
gonna
all
come
the
enough.
needs
Right.
of the business, of the small businesses recovery. But I do believe the county needs to be part of that recovery of small businesses, as well as the city of Lacey, Tumwater, and Olympia. They're participating also on this
With their money.
with their money, with
With their
Thurston
money.
Strong. So this is more of a regional approach, and the Thurston Strong group, which Jenica is part of this, is really what is gonna be gelling all that. And they have the expertise in place as to how, because they know specific needs within the small business community. And that is the intent. So out of the $1 million, the board can start discussing how much can be that set aside to that effort. It will be an installment first, a second installment next. All that is within your preview. But again, out of the $1 million that is included in my suggestion,
To start with.
to start with.
Well, would that include, and I guess that's up to the board to decide, for the external piece of it, a chunk of dough that would help get food to people or other basic needs to people?
Yeah, you have an option to do that in terms of United Way is the outfit in which they provides those services to aside from the businesses themselves. That's an option that you may consider.
That's where I was going with United Way.
Yeah.
Okay, Ty?
Just that's a big focus of what I was hoping with the CDBG money would be looking at, because the focus there is low income, and
There it is.
there was some flexibility in the guidance we got on that money that would seem to target that. So not that we couldn't pull from both places, but I was just reminding folks of that discussion on CDBG.
Yeah, and I believe the meeting, they are current, the CDBG money, and Commissioner Hutchins can elaborate on this. That was, I believe, the consensus of the group, focusing on food aid.
That was the major consensus and theme threaded throughout that conversation, was to use that money for the organizations that are delivering senior citizen meals, Meals on Wheels. Everything was food related, getting food to people, because there's such a shortage now, the food banks and such. We're going to get next week on that.
Okay,
Go ahead, Gary.
I just chime in on that, the food bank portion of this. I know that Tenino's food bank is trying to get things all the way around, not just Tenino, but they're covering Bucota and the rural area down there as well. And one of the needs they had, at least at one time, was a vehicle. Now, I don't know if they solved that problem with intercity transit. I think they've got something going there, but I know they did need a vehicle to get the right stuff to the right place. That's all I know. And maybe that could be a rental. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that could be.
Just suggesting that we look at it. But also, we could probably utilize that money that Ty brought up.
Well, yeah, the CDBG money was going to go to direct services rather than vehicles or personnel and other costs. But I was wondering if $1 million for external out of the CRF would be an adequate set aside, or maybe 1.5 million.
We can always come back to the 13, but we're gonna run out of money pretty quick, in my estimation, as we're.
Well, we will.
This.
Yeah,
And,
just food for thought.
and also keep in mind, this perhaps it will be the only money available to internal county needs,
True.
and there are many.
Yeah.
as you may realize when you see the applications.
Unless OFM decides to distribute the additional 200 million, or the HEROES Act should pass
Yeah.
with local funding intact, this will be the money that we have.
Robin, I don't, I'm not holding my breath for the heroes, but there is $200 million or $240 million. Have you heard anything about what the alternative use of that money could be from the state?
WASAC is negotiating with the state on releasing it, and that's all I know. It's the state does not have to release it to the local jurisdictions. So
I wonder, is anybody mind reading what they just use it for their general purposes of?
they can't use
Shortfalls.
it for general purposes either. It's not like the state can use it to make up the 7 billion that they're estimating they're going to lose in revenue. They can also only use that money for response, but
But they've
their
got 1,000
response is
things.
great as well.
Yeah, they have many millions of dollars they can use for response.
Yeah.
But the question that I believe, and we will continue to have a conversation with WASAC, at least if in the last 2 weeks, we have not received a response as to why they have held back $240 million.
Well, they're hearing loud and clear that we want it released. Now we're just waiting for any kind of a response or reply. Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
I think at this time, because we're running out of time, I would like to focus on this new development proposal over on by 58th and KG. It's 600 lots. I'd like to get an estimate from our folks on how long they feel it would take to get this thing approved, up and moving, so we could have some idea how fast we could be creating jobs here. This business about, well, we're getting to it and all that, I would like to request them to give us a date, time specific. Are they gonna get it done in 30 days? Are they gonna get it done in 2 weeks? You know?
Have you contacted CPED about
Pardon?
that?
Over at CPED, yes. It's already
No, have
been, it's over there already.
Have you
Like-
talked with them about it, I'm asking, to get your answers? Go ahead, Romero.
I know the commissioner would like to move from this, but I'd like to have a concurrence one from the board on the proposal that I laid out in front of you related to the CARES money.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Okay, so we will be sending this application to the internal. In the next conversation that is gonna be with the board as to the allocation of for external needs, how you like to split that. And again, it doesn't have to be on one installment, it can be a couple installments. You know, my suggestion would be for you to strongly consider the Thurston Strong. And but again, that will be as to how much you would like to do that, because that's an eligible activity on this.
And you want that now then?
Maybe not. Maybe
Okay.
when you receive the applications internally, then you have a holistic conversation. Whether you
Okay.
want to keep the $1 million or maybe add more or less. But at least to have a commitment from the board, investing and supporting the Thurston Strong will be a good strategy.
All right.
Isn't there a meeting this afternoon involving the EDC and the Chamber of Commerce?
There's a webinar.
A webinar going on?
It's a webinar, kind of a podcast webinar at 2:15, I think it is, something like that.
Yeah.
We're gonna be talking about Thurston Strong. It'll be the EDC and the Chamber putting this on.
Yes. So maybe we'll have some information even after that.
I think Commissioner Hutchins is the star attraction of the webinar.
I'll be on the webinar along with a gentleman named Will. Gosh, I can't think of Will's last name, but he's an economist. Don't know if I have it here. Let me look and see. Will Kitchen is his name, and I don't recall what his title is, where he works. But he's an economic, I think it was economic recovery. And I don't know if the state, if it's a state agency or not. But we'll see.
Okay, so that's yet to be determined, I guess, what we're gonna do. But I still would like to get a commitment from our CPED folks, how fast they can make this happen. Let's see if the bureaucracy is willing to adjust to the need of the new reality that we're gonna be forced into dealing with. And I'd like to get an estimate from them.
So my question though, have you talked with Josh about that?
I have not talked with him. I don't usually interact with Josh that much. I talk to the county manager quite a bit.
What I'm hearing is the application was submitted just this Monday.
It was submitted Monday, that's
So,
right.
I think, staff needs to see it's not just about processing the review of the application, because it may require the hearing examiner to be part of that conversation as well.
It very well might. I don't know the answer to all
So-
that, but I want an answer about a date specific when we can get moving. Not this business about, oh, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and the whole bureaucratic nightmare that exists today in government to slow down the economic engine. And that's what's happening. We've got a golden opportunity here to move forward in a timely fashion and have jobs like, what do they call that? Shovel ready. I wanna get this thing going, and I don't see why we can't, put it on the plate right now. How long do you think this might take you? We'll find out at that point if that's satisfactory or not. I wanna push on this. I don't wanna do business as usual.
Point well taken. So it will be, next Wednesday, we're gonna have another 3 or 4 hour gig on page 2 and 3 of this that we haven't gotten through yet.
Yeah, related to the budget, I will schedule another budget session next Wednesday to continue the conversation. And then on Friday, you have a day-long conversation. Hopefully at that time, you will go through each of those proposals that they will be receiving from offices and departments related to the letter we just discussed earlier today. And then by the end of Friday, direction and decisions, hopefully we can achieve with the board.
All right, got it. And we'll get that letter today to sign. That's gonna go out to, internally?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Yes, there is. I really think that we need to set a date as to when we can expect some kind of a response. The Master Builders Association is waiting in the wings. They have the professionals that are able to get this thing going. I don't wanna just sit here and talk about, well, maybe. Let's put a date down right now. Maybe next Friday is the date, when we can have an estimate about how long this will take. And then we as commissioners can review that estimate and see what we need to do from our policy end of things to expedite this process.
I don't even know what you're talking about, Gary. This is a budget discussion. You're talking about putting 600 homes in some place in the county. I don't know where KG Road is. I don't know what this is even about. So if you want to bring a project with some details so we can think about if we need to change some rules to make this project, I don't know what this is about. And it sounds like you're fired up to blow through a bunch of bureaucratic hurdles, as you call them. And I don't know what this is even about.
Okay, here's what it's all about. It's about a proposal that a group has submitted. I've never seen the proposal. I can't tell you who's behind it or anything about it. But I would like to have that basic information to answer your questions and my questions about how long might this take. Maybe they'll come back and say, well, this won't work at all. This doesn't even fit. Okay, well, why doesn't it fit? What could we do to make it fit? Well, maybe we can't do anything to make it fit. But we have to be able to move forward on these things, not the normal process of it sits on somebody's desk for 6 weeks. They decide to take some action, but they went on vacation. Somebody else calls in sick. It is a bureaucratic nightmare, and time is money in the real world that I'm talking about.
All right. So the
I just
first
want an
step
answer.
is getting something from Josh.
When
Let us know where the
can
project
we
is.
get that? Can we put it on Josh's desk and say, Josh, get back to us in 1 week with this rough estimate and what it's all about. I don't know what it's about either.
Well, he works for the county manager. Is that something you can ask him about, Romero?
Well, and again, I can certainly work with Josh, because this is, the first time I've heard about this project myself.
Me too.
So, and I
Me
don't know,
too.
I don't know about the complexities of this project. Whether a week is adequate, for staff to see how long it will take a review, I don't know. So I will hate for me to commit at this point to bring a response on those terms in a week. Because,
No,
because the last thing that I want to do, to be honest with you, is set staff for failure. Because as soon as we give an unrealistic deadline for you, then we're going to be criticized because we provide a deadline without having the opportunity to review the details and the magnitude of this particular development.
Or anything else that comes up?
But I will touch base with Josh, and hopefully he's aware of this proposal, and then start working on that question.
And I'm not looking for a date certain, because I just think that's completely outlandish. Hey, give me a date when it'll be done.
I'm
But
not
I would like
saying,
to, let me finish, Commissioner, but I would like to know about the project, the scope of the project. Because it sounds, if what you're saying is accurate, there's 600 homes, that's good size. And it will
Yes.
employ a lot of people. And
yes,
it'll give people homes.
Yeah,
But I want to know what he knows about it, and find out what the process looks like, and if there is a way to streamline any process, but at least get some basic information.
that's all I want is basic information, and I think Commissioner Mentzer wants basic information. That's all I'm asking for. When can we get some very basic information so we get a sense of what's going on?
Yeah, so let me work with Josh as to when he's ready to provide you with that information.
I mean, is it too much to ask that within a week, we could at least get a rough idea of what even is going on?
But again, we don't understand, at least I don't understand the magnitude of this project.
I don't
as to what
either.
it's gonna take.
But why can't somebody look at it and come back to us and say,
So
yes, this is what's proposed?
He will.
I'm just providing a perspective, so whatever the
will.
direction of the board.
He'll get that.
Just using the example we had last year, and it wasn't in our jurisdiction, but that Green Cove project, 181 homes. Yeah, there were like innumerable like complexities and historical components to it, and water issues and et cetera. And it's still not, and the city of Olympia is still wrangling with it, and it's been a year and a half. And that's probably that's the frustration I know you're talking about.
That's right.
So I get that, but but to just come in and go, hey, there's a proposal for 600 homes in some random place. I mean, I have no idea whether there's Green Cove scale complexities or whether it's a very straightforward project that we could be able to, push more quickly. I don't know any of that.
Commissioner Edwards, I feel your frustration, and I'm with you. I like the stuff to get out of the way and get the pipe unclogged, get services going to not only for people, but for the economy as well. But it has to be done reasonably. So Romero will get information and bring it back.
I will work with Josh to provide a timeline.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'd just like to know about the project. I don't know exactly where it is either. I'd just like to know something about it, and I
You
don't
just told
think
us
it's
where
too
it
much. What? What's that?
You just told us where it was, I thought.
Oh, I know the general location, but I don't know anything about this. I see it as a golden opportunity to possibly meet the need of the urban flight. And I'm telling you, we should be paying attention to what's going on with these big corporations that are recognizing their people are gonna be working from home. That 2 million square foot cancellation down in San Francisco is just one little example of what's gonna be going on around the world. Nobody wants to live in the ghettos anymore. Those days are over.
All right, thank you. And now we're out of time for the budget discussions. And we'll be back again the next time. I don't know if it's tomorrow or next week. I know next week for the budget. But thank you for joining in. Bye-bye.